Alright everybody, welcome back! So you were looking at the only top tier jet that is still capable of fighting the premium spam at 11.3. This of course is the F-15 Eagle, specifically the F-15J, but all of them share the same battle rating right now. The Japanese one does have some minor differences from the American and Israeli ones, which I'll get to later on, but for all intents and purposes, all of them are going to be basically the same to fight against. With the notable exception of the rank 8 F-20, basically every other premium peters out at 11.3. Of course, you have the F-4S and the MiG-23ML, which are spam, but you also have plenty of people using the F-4J UK and the Mirage F-1C premiums, right? And all of these are unable to fight the top tier vehicles, except for the F-15, because Gaijin in their infinite wisdom didn't look at the actual performance of the aircraft and instead focused purely on the statistics of the aircraft and how players are actually performing in it. This has left the F-15 in the position where when it gets down tiers like the one that I'm in right here, which depending on which one you're using can happen more or less frequently, you are actually unmatched both in terms of your flight performance and in terms of your kit. And I made a video talking about this huge problem earlier on, and the problem still remains. Now, the Japanese F-15 in particular, this is just from my own personal experience, seems to get these down-tiered matches much more frequently than the American ones. I have a theory as to why, and personally, I think it's because Japan actually lacks a 12.7 vehicle. The F-15J is their highest battle rating vehicle at 12.3, and so unlike the other nations that have the F-15, like Israel and the US, which both have F-16s that are sitting at 12.7 still, and thus pull the F-15s up with them most of the time, I have been getting a relatively frequent amount of down tiers to 11.3. And so you'll have games where the Tornado F-3 is fighting the F-15 Eagle. This is absolutely ridiculous and really shouldn't happen, but that's not the focus of today's video, right? The focus is on the F-15J. Now, this aircraft is very similar to the F-15A that you'll find in the US and Israeli tech trees. The F-15C in particular, which the F-15J is just an export version of, really wasn't that big of a difference to start off with from the F-15A. The F-15C actually only came a few years later, and up until the MSIP kit was introduced and started being integrated into production, realistically, it really wasn't all that different. Now, it had the ability to mount CFTs, which we don't need in War Thunder, of course. Those are conformal fuel tanks that go on the side of the aircraft and add extra fuel carrying capacity while adding drag and weight. The MSIP kit, which was first introduced around 83 or 84, that is what introduced flares, the upgraded AN/APG-63 PSP radar, and some other stuff as well. This is the one that had countermeasures. This is the one that got the upgraded engines, everything else, right? The original F-15C from 79 did not have countermeasures, had the same engines as the original F-15, and as far as I can tell, had the original radar as well. This is the F-15J as well. Now, the F-15J had a few other modifications, and the one we got in game is a little bit weird because it does get the AAM-3 missile, which I'll talk about later on, but this has the original F-15C radar, it has the original F-15C engines, and realistically, all it has is a bit of extra fuel because the F-15C did also get some extra internal fuel carrying capacity. So in War Thunder, at least, airframe-wise, this is just a heavier F-15A. It has about an extra 500 kilograms of weight compared to the standard F-15, and realistically this won't matter unless you get sucked into an F-15 1v1 against an American or Israeli F-15, which has happened maybe once or twice, and even then the difference is close enough that as long as you're a better pilot, you should still be able to pull it off. The bigger thing, of course, is the AAM-3 when it comes to differences between these, and the AAM-3 is basically just a better AIM-9M at the moment. Now, in terms of turning capabilities, it's really not all that different than the AIM-9M. It's going to pull maybe slightly inside the AIM-9M, but not by much. What it really does a lot better, though, is range. It has a much lower drag coefficient, and even though the missile itself is bigger, this still gives it much greater range than the AIM-9M, which in tail chase is going to give you about an extra kilometer or so of range at low altitude. That increases a lot at higher altitudes, and so you'll have AAM-3s connecting from much, much further than you'd expect from a typical AIM-9M. After using these, I think I agree with pretty much everything else, that these do make the F-15J the best F-15 in the game, but I don't really think it's by enough of a margin for it to actually realistically matter in most games. Pretty much every shot that you take with an AAM-3, an AIM-9M would have also hit. So I don't think that the AAM-3 being a bit better than the AIM-9M is anything to get upset over, for now. That could change because there are bug reports that would make the AAM-3 much more agile than the AIM-9M, and apparently it should also have better IRCCM as well. So if both of those go through, we'd be looking at a missile that is much closer to AIM-9X level than where it is right now, where it's currently slightly better AIM-9M level. One of the things I always like to talk about is the future upgrade paths, and with the F-15J, it's a little bit murky because it very much depends on what exactly Gaijin decides to do. So this specific F-15J that we have right now is an early pre-MSIP F-15J that Japan received. Now, the Japanese did actually get some F-15Js with, that didn't have MSIP, but did have flares, and that is one of the ones that Gaijin seems to have modeled. The F-15A, on the other hand, Gaijin has said is supposed to be a 1994 U.S. Air National Guard one, and those would have also received a radar update, along with the ability to carry AMRAAM and, of course, the countermeasures. Now, what Gaijin could do with their F-15J is just go ahead and swap out the engine, swap out the radar to that PSP radar, and just give it the AMRAAM just like that. What I think is more likely is they're going to go ahead and add a second F-15J MSIP after this one to force you to grind it, and that one would have, all the other MSIP changes with the new cockpit, with the new engines, with the new radar, and they would go ahead and give it AMRAAM. Now, I know what a lot of y'all are about to say, but the F-15J didn't use AMRAAM. Well, they tested it, they did mount it on there, and it is compatible, because it is an MSIP F-15. And sure, it did use AAM-4. I kind of doubt they're going to give it AAM-4. I could be wrong. They could just massively gimp the AAM-4 like they did with the AAM-3. But I think it's much more likely to just go ahead and give it the AMRAAM for now and add the AAM-4 later on when we're getting stuff like AMRAAM C7. Because that is around the contemporary of the AAM-4. There's also another F-15 upgrade after that, which is the MTDP upgrade that they received, which has the AN/APG 63V1, which is the last non-ESA radar for the F-15. And then there is also the F-15JSI, which is in a little bit of a murky spot. They seem to have cut funding for it. They did receive the radars, and apparently 3 of them have been made. So my current prediction is this F-15 will stay pretty much as is. Gaijin will add an F-15J MSIP next to give you AMRAAMs, then they'll add a later F-15 which has the AAM-4s, and then maybe the JSI at the very end as well. I would say at minimum we're looking at 3 F-15Js, maybe 4 depending on what Gaijin actually decides to use. We should see exactly what they decide to go with next update, as a matter of fact, because Gaijin has confirmed that the June update will be the AMRAAM patch, and they have also said that every nation is to get AMRAAM at the same time. So we'll see if they decide to make a second one or just modify our current F-15J, but either way, I'm still going to enjoy this thing in the meantime. It really should be 12.7. They need to move this aircraft up. It is just not fair for all these 11.3 premiums. I thought they were about to get a chance, to stay away from all these super high tier stuff, and then they just made it even worse, because now instead of having, fellow top tiers on your team, instead it's just F-15s versus all the lower tier stuff instead. Which is just a wonderful recipe, and I have a feeling the stats are still pretty bad for this because I see way too many F-15s pilots bombing. In any case, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I'm shooting for 20,000 subscribers before my birthday in July, if possible. And let me know what y'all's thoughts on this whole situation are in the comments down below. Enjoy your Eagles, and I'll catch y'all next time. So, peace, y'all.